I'm with Susanna Kokkonen from the Hope for Persecuted Peoples. Now, Susanna, what is Hope for Persecuted Peoples?
Well, this is a new initiative that was founded in November 2018 in Washington, D.C. It was me and American Christian leaders. We decided that we needed to have it. And what makes this unique is that we intend to fight anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews, but also persecution of other peoples, primarily Christians being the most persecuted group in the world today. Most organizations tend to choose either anti-Semitism or persecution. So we feel that there's a connection that we have to do it. We have to emphasize both of them.
Mm-hmm. So your organization is very, very new, but why were you started?
Well, so basically we felt that we wanted to engage Christians, like we wanted to educate them. I have my background in Holocaust studies, and the Holocaust is extremely relevant to any kind of persecution, because in the Holocaust you actually have present all the stages that researchers have been able to identify as being part of persecution and genocide. So we are in the process of creating this educational program for churches, but also for synagogues or Christian schools, like it could be different audiences. And then once we have that education going, we are hoping that through that we'll be able to raise funds for actually supporting Christians who need, maybe they need their medical bills covered, or maybe we need to bring doctors to them, or maybe they need sanitary items, clothing. We don't even know yet, but the whole world is changing so much and there are so many things happening all the time that there's such a big need for humanitarian aid at any time.
Mm. So does this mean you're going to be traveling a lot around the world, around the country?
Well, so one part of what we want to do and one part of the education is that I'm already traveling a lot and teaching about these things. But the difference is that I'm teaching, I'm coming invited somewhere and giving a lecture or seminar. But we want to make it more systematic by teaching, by training other people who can train others. So it won't be a work that only two people are doing. It will grow and we'll have a lot of people in different communities who are able to give this educational training. But personally, yes, I believe so that I will still be traveling a lot.
Mm. And obviously you're just new and you're traveling a lot and sharing about the work. Are you wanting to develop and set up projects in the future?
Yes, so basically we would like to support projects with persecuted Christians mainly, but could be other groups. And I personally believe more in very roots level, very basic things, like not that we have to hire people and they will have big salaries and so on, but we would like to be able to make a difference by, it might be even like training women, to be able to make some money by having some skills, or men, or supporting like a classroom with an English teacher, or, different things, but very grassroots level where you are actually able to see where the money goes and what difference it makes.
Mm. Was there a need for an organization for such a time as this?
Well, I of course believe that there is, and many people would say, well, there are already so many groups. But the thing about this is that we are very much pro-Israel, and we want to be openly pro-Israel, and we want to be openly against anti-Semitism. So if somebody doesn't want our help because of that, then, they have a lot of other organizations to work with. But I would not want to be helping people, for example, in the Middle East, and then denying the biblical connection of the Jewish people to the land just so I can have favor with somebody. So I think that's like the unique thing, and I think a lot of people don't really see that there's a connection between anti-Semitism. Like, even if anti-Semitism is growing and Christian persecution is growing at the same time, people actually don't think about it, that you should speak about them together. And, we have such a connection between Jews and Christians. Why are we both being persecuted?
So in one sense, if you bless Israel, we will bless you.
Well, yes, but I think it's more than that. Like, I think there's that deep connection that we are really both the people of the book, Christians and Jews, we both carry like God's word in us if we live our lives according to, try to live our lives according to God's instructions. And that's what makes us targets of hatred. But, you can't stand against hatred with more hatred. So you have to stand against it with other means. And I believe that if we Jews and Christians help each other, we'll be much stronger for this battle.
That helps to build a good relationship between Christians and Jews, because it hasn't always been there in the past, has it?
Exactly. I mean, when we think back to the Holocaust and everything, that it's unbelievable that the church was so silent and everything. But in a way, much of the church is even silent today in the face of the persecution. And we need to wake up and we need to realize that we can't just allow other people being persecuted whilst we are living in the West and we have all this liberty. And we need to be responsible for how we use our time and our resources.
Are Christians in the Middle East the most persecuted at the moment?
Well, Christians are persecuted very much in Asia now. There are some Asian large nations where persecution is growing. Actually, China is now increasingly back in that category. And then, of course, in India, there are terrible things against Christians. Then in the Middle East, of course, because if you think about the open doors list of countries that are the worst, of course, the Middle East is very prominently on that list. But I would say that North Korea might still be the worst place to be a Christian.
Why is that? Why is there so much persecution against Christians at the moment, you think?
You mean all over the world? Or?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we go now into very deep things because it depends if your worldview is biblical or not, how you see these things. But just think about it, that this is like very open, very on your face, horrible physical persecution. But even when we think back to our Western nations, there are certain moral issues and certain discussions in the society where Christians are going to have to take very unpopular stands if they want to follow the Bible, that is. So I think it's the age we are in. There has always been persecution. I mean, Jesus said that we would be persecuted. But I think we are living in such an age where our Christian values are going to be against the stream more and more. And it might be different because persecution it doesn't always look the same. So it might be different in different places. But it really, to me personally, it really relates to the times that we are living in and the systems in specific nations and the religions.
Now, we all see what happened in the Holocaust, and we have Holocaust Memorial Day, and we remember all those things, but do you think we haven't really learned in the end?
Well, it's very sad to say because I devoted such a big part of my life to Holocaust education, and it's still a big part of what I talk about. But I think that if you think especially about the silence during the Holocaust and then the silence now, I think you can see very much the same trends because human nature doesn't change and you can educate, but there needs to be like some kind of deeper switch in the thinking.
Now, are Christians facing today what Jews have faced it for a long time?
Yes, I mean, the Jewish history since the diaspora began, and some people say that it's even evident in the Bible in different episodes that they went through in biblical times. But they have been facing hatred forever. It's called the oldest hatred, and interestingly, even in the book of Ezekiel, it's mentioned as God speaks about ancient hatred against his people. So that's very interesting. So yes, the Jews have been facing it and are still facing it, and not just in some extreme nations, but in our Western countries increasingly. Christians were once persecutors, they were persecuting, and now, of course, everything looks very different.
Why do you do what you do?
Well, I had to think about that many times, especially when I left my very comfortable, in some ways very comfortable position at the Holocaust Memorial, that why do you do what you do? But for me personally, I think it's about serving God. And I felt already for many years that God was going to change my calling or increase it or enlarge it. And you have to always to evaluate your motives. Like, am I doing this just for me, or am I doing it for these people, or am I doing it for God? And I think every day when you wake up, or quite often, you need to have some kind of conversation with yourself and with God, and try to understand why. But I'm hoping that my main motive for doing what I do would be to serve God.
Mm. And what's your prayer, particularly for the persecuted at the moment?
I am praying that the church in the West would wake up and start acting and speaking more on their behalf. That's one thing. But the second thing is that it's very, very hard for persecuted Christians to get asylum in the Western world. And even in 2015, when we had the huge influx of refugees, their numbers were so small, and it was very hard for them to register themselves with the UN or anything. There was so much hostility. And our Western nations, many of our leaders were saying that we couldn't take people in based on their religion, but in fact we did that. We denied the Christians entry. And that's also wrong. So, I mean, some people feel that, people have to stay where they are, but I'm not sure about that, because even the disciples, when there was persecution in the book of Acts, they did actually flee. They did, scatter. Yeah. So I'm not saying, I do think that I pray that at least those who need like an asylum, that they would be able to get an asylum. But then, of course, I think it's a bigger prayer, because we have to pray for this whole system, whether it's a political system or if it's a religious political system, that has to come down. That has to come down, because that's ultimately the solution. And we know that there are many Christians, for example, in Iran, where they are persecuted, but there is a very, very large underground church. So God is able to work through that. But I still feel that we, as Western Christians, that we should be like somehow influencing things for the better for our brothers. So I think the prayer is like, it includes us and them and the people around them who are not saved, and the whole political or religious system.
Anyone who'd like to book you for maybe coming to speak in the church, can they do that? How can they do that?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And my email is simply Susanna, SUSANNA, at persecutedpeoples.com. So it's a very easy email, and then we can go from there. And I travel and I speak, and I'll be happy to visit another community.
Okay, Susanna, thank you very much.
Thank you.